Welcome! Hope you enjoy the video, but don't forget to like and subscribe. In this video I'll be showing you some history of and how I created the latest incarnation of my Christmas nativity display. Castle Hill is a predominant feature of the Townsville skyline. In 1962 local students painted a stick figure of the saint on it, and it has remained an iconic landmark for the region. I decided to base my early nativity display based on this figure. In 2014 I cut the shapes from plywood, painted them white and added reflective tape to make the halos glow. In 2021 I stepped it up, creating light boxes, which include designing and 3D printing task-specific brackets to hold the light strips. The biggest problem was the weight. The two larger pieces weighed about 20 kilos each, and once they went up on the balcony, well, that's where they stayed for the next 3 years. In 2024 I decided to redesign the display with the hope to make it more weather resistant and, more importantly, lighter. The items I used for this project are core flute sheets, I used pre-loved sheets, timber for framing. I was also able to reuse pieces from the version 2, well, mostly. Fairy lights, a staple gun, a hot glue gun, hobby knife, permanent marker, low sheen black exterior paint, acrid hair adhesive, baking paper as a light diffuser, adhesive felt pads and push pins. I marked up my design using the faceplate from version 2. It wasn't until I'd almost finished transferring the design across before I realised I hadn't positioned it correctly and had cut off one of his feet, so I had to start again. Using the craft knife, carefully cut at the area where the lights will be shining through. On this design, the halo, head and elbow sections will need to have the inner section masked off, so don't discard these pieces just yet. Cut out the inner sections of the halo, head and elbow, then position them roughly in place to get a feel for how it will look. I'll now place the front plate on top of the back plate and transfer the design across. This will be a guide to where to place the lights. Don't forget to mark out where the floating masterpieces go as well. I marked out the positions for the LEDs, separating them each by about 5 centimetres or 2 inches. I then marked the opposite side at roughly the halfway point on the opposing side of each strip. This will allow for a good amount of light to shine through. I used a timber from the previous project for most of the framing, but it's still pretty cheap from our local hardware anyway. As you can see, I've attached the LEDs so that the light itself is just inside the marked perimeter with a hot glue gun. Then held it in place with a push pin until the glue hardens. I had to be very careful not to put the pin through any of the wires. I'll point out here that the clear push pins were probably not the best choice, as they're a bit hard to see when it came to removing them. I also mapped out the direction the lights need to be attached to allow for the best and most direct coverage.
A few inches later.
This piece will have 3 floating areas. So to support these pieces best, I added some offcuts that the floating panels will later be attached to. I found it best to add these pieces before adding the lights. I initially secured the support pieces with some hot glue, but when I've finished, I'll flip it all over and then staple them from the back. It's a good idea to test the lights several times throughout the project to make sure it's all still working. When all the lights were attached, I marked out and cut an X next to where the last light was glued down. I then fed all the unused lights through this spot so they can be hidden behind the display piece. I used a low sheen exterior paint here as I don't want any glare reflecting off the dark areas. It's also much cheaper than blackboard paint. I experimented with a few different glues and found the Selleys Aquatear gives me the best results. Remember that I'm trying to attach wax covered baking paper to a plastic sheet, so nothing's going to be perfect. I allowed for a reasonable amount of overlap, and I guess that time will tell how it holds up to the elements. Baking paper, as was a nice cheap option, and it held up pretty well to several weeks being exposed to sun, heat and rain. And here's the front panel with all diffuser paper attached. I laid the front panel on top and of course, once again, a light test. When I was happy that the front panel was positioned correctly, I placed an adhesive felt pad in all the places I intend to staple. This avoids a staple tearing through the core flute. With all that done, time for the big reveal. Wow, that looks better than I expected. I can't wait till I can add it to this year's Christmas display. Thanks for watching.